Hey everybody, I'm Jason, and by now I hope that most of you have at least seen some of my videos, or have any idea who it is I represent. That would be Ether RPG and Clockwork Angel Studios. For those of you who don't know what either of those two things are, well, I'm about to tell you. But this is a re-recording of an old video that I did. One of my first videos. Several of my first videos. And I gotta tell you what, boy, were they definitely and obviously some of my first videos, because wow, was I a block of wood. And I'm bringing you this today so I can reintroduce Ether RPG to you and its material, and we're going to start with just a brief overview about what it is, what it isn't, what you can play, the genre types, and why it's unique, and also where and when you can get it. So, for those of you still interested enough in me that you're still watching, what is Ether RPG? Well, Ether RPG is a die 20, hold on, sort of system. It isn't a die 20 system. This is not an open gaming license game. Its mechanics and rules are not at all the same. It is just based on a die 20. So if you have played die 20 games in the past, you will be at least somewhat familiar in how the die system works. It is similar, but it is not the same. So keep that in mind for those of you who do or do not like die 20 games. Maybe if you don't, you might want to give this one a chance when it becomes available. You might like it. And if you do, well, I definitely suggest you should give it a chance. I'm writing it! So, what's the genres of Ether RPG? Well, primarily it's steampunk with fantasy, but there are also elements from dieselpunk, cyberpunk, and it even has post-apocalyptic and dystopic elements. Now, that's a whole lot of genre to fit into one game. I know. So, how exactly does that work? Well, steampunk and high fantasy are its core genres. The rest of them, I would say, are influences. Those of you who are familiar with steampunk, you know what I'm talking about. Those of you who aren't, how are you not familiar with steampunk? Steampunk, Jules Verne, look it up. Victorian meets steam machinery and advanced levels of technology for purposes of the time period. Excellent genre, but, to each their own. I know that some like it and some don't. Well, this is a steampunk-heavy genre. It also has elements of fantasy, so you will find magic and machine in this game. So, post-apocalyptic influence, diesel punks, how does that all work? Well, I'll tell you. The setting of the world is effectively a world that has survived the fall. A magical apocalypse pretty much nearly tore reality apart, and what you have is the vestiges of various races and beings sort of clinging together to survive what nearly was the end of everything as a result of magic. So as you might guess, a lot of people not too keen on spellcasters. Surprise, surprise on that one. So, there's the post-apocalyptic for you. Now, how far away are you from that near apocalypse? Well, that depends upon the setting and the time period you choose. The game does give you the ability to play, well before, during, shortly after, or even way after the apocalypse, the near apocalypse occurred. So, when and where you play is completely up to you. The standard setting is briefly after the apocalypse, near apocalypse. I keep saying apocalypse like everything was destroyed, when it wasn't. So, you still have cities that are not recovered from that event. Thousands dead, hundreds of thousands dead, possibly even over all planes, millions dead. Well, what did that do? Well, what it didn't do was completely and utterly destroy cities. They survived. They're still there. Society and civilization is still around. It wasn't so bad. We're talking Fallout here. You're talking more along the lines I would compare to, minus, of course, the futuristic settings, Judge Dredd, where the outside world is dangerous. Now, consider the outside world more like a lush, vibrant, savage world. A la, say, Jurassic Park. No dinosaurs, I'm just giving you an example. But the cities themselves more like the megacities of Judge Dredd, because people gather in them. They don't want to leave them for fear of lack of safety. The things outside, the planar beasts that have come across the rifts and other magical barriers have made the wilderness of the world extremely unsafe. The various portals that blink open and closed and randomly pull people in or release planar anomalies or further monstrosities into the world are common and very, very threatening to any traveler's safety. So few people travel out of the cities if they don't have to, and they certainly don't unless they are heavily armed. So there's your post-apocalyptic, and your fantasy elements, of course, are because you can play fantastic creatures, you see fantastic things, and you can use magic. Now, what about dieselpunk? Well, since the fall happened, assumedly, some time ago, technology has advanced rather rapidly as a result of the hate of the old ways of magic. So when you have something that gets focused on rapidly, you have a quick rise in its development. And since steampunk technology is the primary tech, the best direction to go from there, if you're sticking to that sort of punk genre, is dieselpunk. And people are starting to make more stylized, more powerful, armored equipment. It doesn't look raw and unrefined anymore. It's starting to take shape and become molded, sort of retro-futuristic, you could say. And that's the direction individuals are going. They're moving away from classic forms of technology, classic forms of energy consumption, and moving towards something a bit more advanced. So, cyberpunk, where does that come into play? Well, cyberpunk technology is very slim in this game, but what it primarily draws itself from are robotics and cybernetics, which both do exist in this game in rudimentary form, but certainly not steampunk form. You don't see the cybernetic replacements in this game having hook hands or requiring straps across the chest and shoulder to keep on. They are sometimes bolted for the lesser ones, or grafted in place. So you have far more advanced body replacement technology as well as machinery. You don't just have these clunky robot drones walking about with strange shapes and unrefined forms. Oh no, they can be fully functioning machinery, robotics, and constructs, automatons in their own right. So that pretty much covers what you're looking at as far as the genre is concerned. Now, what can you play in the game? Well, that's an important question. I'll be getting into detail on this in later videos, but you have 10 races to choose from and 10 classes. I'm going to talk about why you should play at the same time. In terms of those, well, the customization. I've designed hundreds of different choices for abilities to start and as you level up through the course of the game to choose from. There's also dozens upon dozens of alchemical items, as many dozens of magical items, hundreds of spells, and enormous lists of other objects to use that are pretty much customizable from top to bottom on how you can use them and what you can use to bolster them. The classes work about the same. The abilities, well, are your choice. You don't start with anything except one thing, depending upon what your class or depending on what your race is. Everything else, you have to choose from certain sections when you start, but as you level, the world is your playground. You can take whatever abilities you want as long as you meet the prerequisites, and that's it. There's no linear direction when it comes to your build. What's that? There's these 50 things you want to take. Great. Pick from any one you want, take it, and go. So you have the flexibility to sort of do whatever you want with your character and go in any direction you want with it. The classes themselves and the races. Well, this is a fantasy game, but it isn't a typical fantasy game. You're not going to see stereotypical Tolkien races in here. There are no halflings, there are no dwarves, there are no elves, no half-orcs, none of that. You're drawing upon creatures more like living machines, living plants, spell-eaters, shapeshifters, immortals, descendants from monstrous bloodlines, living elementals, beings touched by the elements, and a whole array of different beings that are well outside the norm as far as what they are and how they work. Unfortunately, classes, there is a little bit of traditional in here and a little bit of non-traditional. Primarily, if you're playing a role-playing game, a fantasy game, how can you have a fantasy game without a warrior, or a thief, or a sorcerer? Well, that's pretty tough. I don't think you can. And in this game you do. But it does have ones that are a little bit less typical. The scout, which is similar to perhaps a ranger. A berserker, which is kind of similar to a barbarian, but really it's a berserker. And then it has some very atypical classes in fantasy setting. A pilot, a machinist, a diplomat, and even a specialty class unique to this game's system as far as I'm aware called the Keeper. Want to find more? Stay tuned and I'll tell you in future videos about what it's about. So the last thing I want to talk to you about today is if you've liked what you've heard, if you sort of enjoyed my little trip down memory lane, then where can you find Ether? Well, besides all the places in this here corner of the video that you can see Ether in, or at least you should be seeing all those links here in a minute, you can find me pretty much anywhere on the web. I'm all over YouTube, Facebook, Google+, at least I would like to think I am. And again, those links are in this corner and in the bottom of the video, in the description, you can find them. But as of July or August 2014, I should actually have an official website coming out for the game. The hope is that there will be a Kickstarter campaign in 2015. And I should be releasing the game by 2016. Now, why so long, you ask? Well, it's because I'm getting all the designing, editing, writing, and finished product pretty much done prior to the Kickstarter. Because the Kickstarter campaign, there's going to be a lot you can throw in on to get your own little touch added to the game system and credited. Want to find more? Want to find out more about it? Well, listen to future videos and I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about, what customizations and ideas you can add to Ether RPG. Interested? Well, keep in touch. Thanks for watching today. Hopefully I've gathered a few new people. Hopefully I've got some questions. And send me your questions. I'll be happy to answer them. Contact me. Thanks for watching.